And I open with a slide about 90% or 91% of younger workers expect to stay in a job for less than 3 years. And clearly, that's an average, so it's not every millennial is job hopping. But it is the single biggest difference compared to like a baby boomer that expected to get a job out of college and stay there till they retire. So, Deepa, let's start with you. Do you see that playing out? Why do you think that is? And what can companies do to entice workers to stay longer?
It's true to a certain extent, maybe, but I don't know if it's any much greater than what it was before, so I could be wrong, but I myself changed a couple jobs when I just started out. I think it all boils down to the newer generation. They want to do work with a purpose. They want to understand why they're doing it, what's the greater impact. So if more and more companies are starting to talk about it, I mean, if the employee starts to understand that their job has a greater impact, I think it makes it that much more easier. Also having a development plan in place for the employee, a career path, which was what I struggled with when I started initially with some of these companies, where everything was very traditional and very hierarchical, and I had no vision of where I want to go and what I want to be. Whereas at Schneider, we have a very methodical development plan in place. We have a career path that very open discussion with the manager. So I think having that plan really helps. And also having programs where you can educate, provide them education constantly, and putting that plan in place is very, very important. And when you have a plan in place, and if you have rotational programs, and if there is variety, I don't know why anybody would want to move. I think as far as there is variety, and if you think that you're learning constantly, and if you're growing, people would love to stay. There's nothing wrong in moving. I think once in a while it's good to see new workforce come in, and some people leave, and a new talent walk in. But if you have the right retention program in place, I think they're going to stay.
So my wife and I were actually talking about this topic this weekend, and we said, well, maybe it's just because we're selfish and we just want what we want, or maybe we just get bored. And I started thinking about some of the things that were different when I grew up versus maybe when others grew up. And I got to we went from a tape cassette. Well, actually there were records, but I didn't do much with those. But we had tape cassette, and then you went to CDs, MP3s. And this is an interesting analogy where with a tape cassette, if you are in the middle of a song and you don't really like it, your options are hit fast forward and kind of wait. Or you just wait that song out. Well, that doesn't cut it for the millennial generation. If you don't like a song, you're hitting skip, you're hitting next, and ideally an algorithm's figuring out what you want next. But I say a lot to say that it's the desire for different experiences and wanting those quickly. So we talk about job hopping, and I don't know if it's exactly jobs hopping is the reason why this happens. I think it's more that there's a craving for more experiences. And if you can create the perfect scenario, and I had one person on my team, a millennial, he's been in the role for 6 years, but he's managed 4 different product lines. He's got to work on our acquisition strategy, and now he's working on our digital platform for services. Well, same job, but all these different experiences, that's what kept him excited, which we were able to retain him and to get this high performance out of the individual.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And in terms of our generation growing up in the digital age, we just constantly have to be stimulated in some way or some degree. So when you have a good development plan, or you have a good rotational program set for your employees, you're constantly doing a new job. And I've seen that a lot, especially at Thermo Fisher, where we've had folks that have come in, that have left. We've hired back veterans who have gone and learned something new. So it's taboo to say, but sometimes I feel like it could be good for a company, especially a larger company, to have folks leave and come back.
Great.
And I think that also, in terms of millennials moving into new roles, there's a couple factors to consider, which we talked briefly about it, but the job market today and the unemployment rate being so low, everyone's getting reached out to, and I'm sure everyone here has gotten a LinkedIn message or a recruiter's asked of, hey, are you interested in learning more about this opportunity? We offer this, this, or this. So it's a competitive market in and of itself, and companies need to really hop on board with that on how are we going to retain our employees and make sure that we're staying abreast all the technology and the advancements that we're doing today.
Yeah, and I just have to agree with everybody on here. Kind of already fleshed out the entire my thought process and the conversation really. But I think Deepa, you brought up the purpose-driven economy. We're seeing millennials not take the high lucrative job, or if they have it, then they move to something that's more purpose-driven. I think somebody in the session that we had last year had mentioned the purpose-driven economy kind of creeping in on some of these higher end lucrative jobs. And so you have to compete with providing a purpose, and I think every person wants to feel valued at where they're at. And part of that for millennials is having that purpose and being able to achieve that and see those results actually in front of them, and actually be successful in achieving whatever goal that may be. And so to you guys' point, having a career path and seeing where that can lead and kind of feeling that impact is incredibly important. And that's why you might see them switching jobs, because they're looking for new experiences.
And then I have to mention that I have the opportunity to hire interns every year, and I can very proudly say that all my interns are now working full-time in Schneider. I mean, obviously they love something about the company. It's giving them the purpose, and it's giving them the career path that they always wished for. So I would say having that even with my interns, we would sit down and talk about what's the future in the company once they graduate, and having that kind of discussion really helps.
Well, I think a lot of it's economic based too, because I moved to Silicon Valley in 1995, and if you stayed in a job more than 2 years, you were an idiot, because you could get a 30 to 50% raise by changing jobs. And I think especially when you're early in your career, after a year, you can probably get a 20% raise by going to a different company. So, I think that's why retention is tough, because you're competing with Karen, who's out there dangling, this carrot, come take the great experience you have.